Hey everybody, thanks for joining for a Unity tutorial. In this video, I'm going to be going over 2D terrain generation. So this is going to be like a blocky kind of terrain, and I'm going to do it slightly different, just for the fact that typically it would be people would create an object and then they would put it in the project window as a prefab, and then you would instantiate it into the scene. That would already have all your textures, sprites, everything that you need on it. And then you would also drag in another model, being the sprite, for the block you want to generate and that sort of thing. I thought it'd be kind of fun, though, just to do it all from scratch through code. So it's all going to be manually done through code. So to start off, I'm going to create a new folder. I'm going to call this scripts. And then within this folder, I'm going to create a C# script, and I'm going to call this map generator. In this script, I'm going to remove the start and update methods, and then I'm also going to add the static keyword up here. I'm going to remove mono behavior because it won't be sitting on a game object, it's just going to be in the project window. And then in this, I'm going to then create a public static void, meaning that it doesn't return anything. I'm going to call it generate terrain map. Yeah, and then I'm just going to capitalize these. And then it's going to take in some parameters. It's going to take an int for the width, an int for the height. I'm also going to take in a transform for the parent, and a color for the color. It's going to take in more parameters when I mess with noise, but that's going to be in the next video. In this, yeah, I didn't mention it, but in this first video, I'm basically just going to be creating a grid of a bunch of blocks. In the next video, I'm going to be going over actually using noise to then make it look more like terrain. So to start off, I'm going to basically loop through the width and height variables. So I'm going to do a for int x is equal to 0, x is less than the width, and then x plus plus. Then I'm going to do the same thing for the y, so for int y is equal to 0, y is less than the height, y plus plus. Then I'm going to create a new block. So basically, after I loop through the width and height values, I'm then going to create a block into the scene. So I'm going to create a new game object, and in the hierarchy, I'm just going to call it block. And just so I can access this later in the code, or later in the script, I'm going to store this in a game object variable, and I'm just going to call this block, and set it equal to that game object that I create so I can actually access it. And now I want to then add a sprite renderer to that. So just like I did with that, I basically want to store it in a sprite renderer so I can access it later. So I'm going to create a sprite render. I'm just going to call it render, and I'm going to set that equal to block.add component, and I want to add a sprite render. So now that I have a sprite render on the block so I can actually render images, I now want to then set the sprite of the render to being a new sprite that I'm going to create. And to do that, I need to create a new texture, and for that, just to simplify it a little bit, I'm going to create a method for that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a public static texture 2D, and I'm going to call this generate texture. And then this is going to then create a texture 2D, and I'm going to call this texture, and I'm going to set this equal to a new texture 2D, and it's going to take in a width and height. I'm just going to do it 100 by 100. What I'm then going to do is I'm going to loop through the width and the height of the texture. So I'm going to create a for int x is equal to 0, x is less than the texture dot width, x plus plus. I'm then going to do the same thing for the y, so for int y is equal to 0, y is less than the texture dot height, and then y plus plus. So now that I loop through the x and the y, I now want to then set the pixels of that texture. So I do texture dot set pixel to being the x, y, and a color of just color dot white. Now what I need to do is I now need to apply that texture, so I'm going to do texture dot apply after the for loops, and then below that I'm then going to return that texture. because now I'm finished with it. So now I can then return it as the final value. So now up at the top of this method, above the for loops, I'm then going to create a texture 2D called texture, and I want to set that equal to that generate texture method. I'm now going to need to create my sprite. So to do that, I'm going to create a sprite method, or not method, but variable called sprite. I'm going to set that equal to sprite.create. And then what I'm going to do is for the texture, I'm going to do texture. And then for the rect, I'm going to do a new rect. I'm going to feed in the parameter 0, 0, and then 100, 100. And then for the pivot, I'm going to do vector2 dot 0. So I know that was a lot, but now that we have created a texture and also the sprite, I'm now going to set the render dot sprite equal to that sprite we created. And then I'm also going to set the render dot color equal to that color variable. Now what I'm going to do is I now, for the last part of creating this grid, I now need to create, I now need to set the, first of all, I'm just going to set the parent of the block. So I'm going to do block.transform.parent. And set that equal to that parent parameter variable. And then above that, I'm then going to also set the position. So I'm going to do block.transform.position is equal to a new vector2 with the x and the y integers in the for loop. So now that I've done that, now the map generator is done for now until I need to then add noise. So what I'm then going to do is I'm going to create another C# script. I'm going to call this terrain generator. And then on this script, I'm going to want to remove the start and update methods. And I'm going to want to then add my variables up here. So I'm going to create a public int for the width. And actually, just I'm just going to rename them. I'm just going to rename this one to length, which would represent the width. And I'm also going to create a public int, and then I'm going to call this depth, which would represent the height. I'm then going to create a public color called color. And then in the void start method, I'm going to want to then access the map generator dot generate terrain map with a width of length, a height of depth, a parent of this transform, and a color of that color variable. So now if I save that, and for the colors, I'm going to, in a future video, I'm going to create like a whole editor setup for that, so then instead of it being one solid color, you can then like set, depending on the different layers, different colors and textures to make it look better. So for this, I'm going to call this terrain generator. And then I'm then going to add the terrain generator. For the length, I'm going to just make it 50 for now. The depth, I'm going to make 20. And then for the color, I need to make the alpha 1. But just so you can see this is working, I'm also going to make it red. But you do need to make sure to make the alpha channel 1, because that is affected through the color of the render. So if it's 0, then you won't be able to see the blocks because they'll be transparent. So now if I click play, you should see a grid of red cubes form, and you can tell that it's a grid of a bunch of red cubes because if I then click on this cube, you can see the outline there. You can see it right there. You can see the outline. And then if I then scroll through some of these blocks, you can see that it goes up, and then when it gets to the top of the grid, it then moves down to the bottom here, and then continues to go up, making it 20 by 50. And if I do want to change this to being black, which is what I'm just going to have it until I create the color editor, it'll change all the color of all the cubes to being black. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and yeah, join me for the next video. I'll be going over Perlin noise. Bye.